The Ingraham angle from Washington tonight. As always, thank you for spending some time with us. 13 days out, and while top polls show the race is extremely tight and very difficult to predict, there are some undeniable trend lines in Trump's favor. Now, even as Harris has a massive money advantage, we see this from The Economist. Donald Trump takes the lead as polls swing away from Kamala Harris. Now, Harris has dropped 10 points in the survey from just a week ago. And Trump, he surged by 10 on the other side. And Harris is only up in 2 swing states, Michigan and Nevada, according to Bloomberg. Trump leads in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, Arizona, and North Carolina. And last night, for a moment, it seemed even Obama was feeling it.
I notice my palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy.
Heavy? I'm not sure what heavy means. Whatever. Of course, like I said, conservatives shouldn't count their chickens. This is still anyone's race. Remember what happened in 2022. A lot of people were disappointed. But that doesn't stop Republicans from having a little fun in their minds, from dreaming of what they saw 8 years ago.
Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States. President Obama is the ex-president. And Mr. Trump, for the moment.
Can we find her? I'd like to interview her tonight, if possible. Now, as close as things are, Democrats may be running out of cards to play. The best they can hope for is that maybe they can juice the female turnout enough to overcome their deficit with other demographic groups like male voters, Hispanics, black men, and young people. And to that I say, Kamala's bad for women. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Well, none of it really seems to be sticking. They tried Trump's a dictator in waiting. They even compared him to Adolf Hitler. It didn't really work. He's going to unleash the Pentagon on us.
He is out for unchecked power. That's what he's looking for. He wants to send the military after American citizens.
The audience was like, what? None of it's landing. But they keep going negative.
Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged and will stop at nothing to claim unchecked power for himself.
And yet, the lower she sunk with her attacks, well, the lower she sunk in the polls. So now what? Well, now she's turning the page on joy and love to a new chapter of fear and loathing. So from now until Election Day, Kamala's crew will spend their time and a lot of money scaring and lying to women in order to increase turnout. Now, although this strategy may be your only hope, given some of the trends I mentioned earlier, it's not in the least inspiring, nor is it optimistic. It's not what we thought we were getting with Kamala Harris. It's just plain cynical. And coming from Governor Googly Eyes, it's plain comical.
Think about all of the women in your life who you love, daughters, wives, moms, cousins, your neighbors, whatever. This election is literally about their lives.
Literally. Well, the media also got their marching orders. Women be afraid, be very afraid.
If there weren't men like Donald Trump in the world, women actually wouldn't require protection.
The difference could not be more stark relating to women's reproductive rights.
Oh, Mitch. Now, the most bizarre aspect of their supercharged fear campaign targeting women voters is Kamala's decision to involve a former congresswoman with zero following.
I was just with one of the leaders, and I think opinion leaders in the Republican Party, Liz Cheney. She is pro-life, but she also understands the pain and the tragedy that has happened since Donald Trump allowed Roe v. Wade to be overturned.
What tragedy is she talking about? And she's not an opinion leader of the Republican Party, thank you very much. What, the tragedy of more babies being born in states like Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana? This is what the Democrat Party has become? Where the right to abort one's offspring until birth is now their central, defining, sacrosanct organizing tenet? Their dogma? But women, don't fall for it, regardless of where you are on that issue, because Harris herself is responsible for bringing the tragedy to America. Economic suffering with inflation, meaning young families, young women struggle to buy homes and afford basic necessities.
The cost of groceries and gasoline and everything going so high. We live in a fairly rural area. It's the prices that get us.
I could not afford daycare. I tried applying for any kind of assistance and was denied.
Are you going to eat this week, or are you going to save money to pay rent?
It's a heartbreak. And then there's the tragedy of Kamala's open borders. Vicious, brutal crimes committed by illegals against women and girls primarily. Human trafficking, child sex trafficking. We're never going to know the actual number of victims involved, but their cries go unanswered in the Harris campaign, which is why Tim Walz's words are just not believable.
She has had one client, the people. She stood up for women and children against predators and abusers. She stood up for families and communities against transnational gangs and traffickers.
Traffickers, there we are. What a joke. The cartels and the traffickers have been one of the few growth industries under Biden and Harris. And when pressed, Kamala Harris will not apologize for the suffering that her open border has wrought.
Jocelyn Nungary, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration. Do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that.
You know what I call that? Tragic cases. You know, the feigned, concern. That's camera-ready compassion. It's totally phony. And women voters are also mothers, and no mother wants to see her son or her daughter get needlessly killed because of an administration's incompetence. Afghanistan was another Biden-Harris tragedy. And with Liz Cheney set to be Secretary of Defense in a Harris administration, moms should prepare for more of their sons and daughters to go off to war, because that will be on the agenda. And maybe even a draft if things get really bad. And how is any of this, good for women again? Women across America, none of the people you're seeing on TV, you're listening to on podcasts, really believe that Trump is dangerous. You saw Chuck Schumer hanging out at the Al Smith dinner with Trump. He thinks Trump's Hitler? I don't think so. And if Trump wins on January 20th, 2025, and he goes into the White House, well, every single member of MSNBC will be back on the air to attack him. Joe Biden will be at the inaugural, if he can find it, so will Kamala Harris. No high-profile celebrities, I'm sorry, will be selling their belongings and moving to Europe. Liberals will not go into hiding. It is all a lie, and they know it. And smart and savvy women are too cool and too with it to fall for any of this. And that's the angle.
The clock is ticking on Kamala Harris. Less than 2 weeks until Election Day, Democrats are getting prickly about her campaign. Politico says she's running on yesterday and Trump rather than tomorrow and her. Kamala still hasn't been able to answer the easiest question, who are you? She can't tell us because one mistake, game over. The election is that close.
Holy cow, from a historical perspective. We are heading into the election with the closest polls in the Electoral College that we have ever seen, at least over the last 50 years.
Real Clear says the race is too close to call. It's the tightest race in over half a century. And the only campaign event Kamala's done in the last 48 hours, she stopped at a deli.
Pastrami on rye and a slice of German chocolate cake.
Democrats are telling each other, if this is a vibe election, the current vibes ain't great. And now people are starting to cry.
As I said, people are very emotional today. And a lot of tension in Democratic land because they're behaving as if they're losing. I'm just telling you, that's the view of Democrats, too, not just the media, not just Republicans.
Trump's in Georgia tonight with country star Jason Aldean, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., and Tucker. We're expecting some pyrotechnics tonight. We'll take you there later, so stay tuned. Meanwhile, Democrats are still in the getting to know her phase. Kamala wants America to know she's friends with Liz Cheney. And the left doesn't like that.
The Cheney thing, do we really have to do that?
Look, it goes broader than that. Look, Bernie Sanders, Dick Cheney, Taylor Swift.
No.
That one. Oh, the shooting?
No.
Having the Cheneys on board?
Nah. You can't Dick Cheney or Taylor Swift. No.
We're a big tent.
What country did Taylor Swift get us to invade?
It doesn't mean they agree with us. We're not going to take their foreign policy decisions and discussions, and implement those. We're going to take their
promise?
Yes, promise.
She sat down with Telemundo, and she looked two-faced. Watch.
Right now, we're talking about border security, and there's no Democrat talking about pathway to citizenship, an immigration relief, and the benefits that migrants bring to this country.
Oh, but there's no question that migrants bring. America is a country that was built in part by immigrants.
But people are concerned about their TPS, their DACA, we're talking about mass deportations.
I'm not talking about.
What do you stand on mass deportations? What's your stand there?
We need smart, humane immigration policy in America that includes a pathway to citizenship.
So she went from tough girl touring the border with agents to mass amnesty. Telemundo had to interrupt her almost as much as Bret Baier.
Polls suggest that you're having shortcomings with Latinos, specifically with Latino men. Why do you think that President Donald Trump has been able to make those gains with Latinos?
Listen, Donald Trump has, when he was president, had policies that I think have been very harmful to working people. He gave tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations. He will do that again.
But why is he winning with Latino voters? Not winning, but, winning more voters.
But this is not my experience. My experience is I talk with Latino voters every day, all the time. And there is an incredible amount of support there.
Reporters are getting testy with Harris. NBC asked her about taxpayer-funded sex changes 3 times. Still couldn't get an answer.
Do you believe that transgender Americans should have access to gender-affirming care in this country?
I believe we should follow the law. I mean, I think you're probably pointing to the fact that Donald Trump's campaign has spent tens of millions of dollars.
They're trying to define you on this.
Yes,
I'm asking you to define yourself, though.
I believe that people, as the law states, even on this issue about federal law, that is a decision that doctors will make in terms of what is medically necessary.
I will move on, but I don't know that I heard a clear answer from you on the issue of gender-affirming care. What do you want the LGBTQ plus community to know as they're looking for a full-throated backing from you for trans Americans?
I believe that all people should be treated with dignity and respect. Period.
Kamala just does what she's told, but she can't say that. So every answer is as painful for her as it is for you and me. And if she doesn't know where she's going, how is she going to take us with her?
His plans will weaken America's economy.
Then why do you think that's not landing with voters? Because in the numbers, it's the opposite. Former President Trump leads you on this issue.
Well, when I'm out, this is why I'm going out to Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Excuse me, just got in late this morning, actually.
So Kamala's calling Trump tired and unfit, but hasn't held a campaign event in 2 days and can't remember Michigan. Thankfully, the voters know a lot more about Kamala than she does about us.
What are your feelings, and let me start with the women here, about Kamala Harris?
I don't think that she has the personality. I don't think that she has what it takes to go up against Putin and go up against these other presidents that are built for this.
She don't understand our struggles. And for me to believe you for another 4 years, you're crazy.
Right.
Like, you're crazy. You're saying the same thing that you said 4 years ago.
Trump talks about this a lot. He says, you know, Kamala Harris became black when it was convenient. Do you agree with him on that? Do you feel like she's wearing her blackness?
Absolutely. When she swore into the Senate, it was as the first Indian American.
Thank you.
Which is, it's fine. We don't care.
We all know she's not black. Let's understand that. We are all clear of that. But my point of view, and like I told you earlier, she's already been there. She's in office right now.
Shouldn't black women in Philly be ride or die? That should be your base. MSNBC was trying to cherry pick, and they still couldn't find any love for Harris. It's gotten so crazy that Barack Obama is now saying Trump's too old.
I'm going to vote, which means you're going to let a bunch of old people decide your future. You wouldn't do that about your music. You wouldn't do that about your clothes. But you're going to let them decide what your future, your potential careers, what the environment's going to look like. You're going to let them decide that? And you're just going to opt out. That doesn't make any sense.
Barry with the gray hair telling black men not to listen to boomers is kind of funny after he made us listen to Joe Biden for 4 years, the oldest president of all time. Black men are still sore over the last lecture.
I was deeply offended, and it felt like a moment where it's like, you N-words better get in line and do what we say. And it felt like him as the czar of the Democratic Party coming down to say, go get these N-words in line. And the general tone of it was disgusting. It was abhorrent. I don't respect it. I didn't like nothing about it.
Democrats don't care if you're disrespected. Whatever it takes to win. Carville says, time to play dirty.
And I'm really not interested in being very fair about the whole goddamn thing. Okay, I really don't think we should have fought fair against the Germans and the Japanese. I think we should have snuck around them, and I think we should have, gone behind them in the lines and cut their throats, because that was what it was at stake. I think we're literally approaching the same place right now. And I'm not talking about everybody stop, don't faint. I'm not talking about actually slitting a political opponent's throats.
After Trump survived 2 assassination attempts, Democrats are calling him Hitler, saying it's time to slit throats. So it means it's time for...
New hoax alert. New hoax alert. New hoax alert.
The left's biggest hoax chef, Jeffrey Goldberg at The Atlantic, has cooked up a doozy. Says Trump admired Hitler. There's no recordings of this, and everyone says it's baloney. But the VP, who swallows hoaxes to go with her word salads, ran to the cameras.
It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one and vowed to use the military as his personal militia.
She was quoting Kelly there. Kamala is asking for trouble. She knows the Secret Service can barely protect 45. She's playing with fire. She knows it. And so's the White House.
So just to be clear, when you said we do agree, President Biden believes that Donald Trump is a fascist.
I mean, yes, we have said. He said himself. The former president has said he is going to be a dictator on day one. We cannot ignore that.
So in 24 hours, the highest levels of the Democrat establishment have called Trump a Nazi who should be locked up and have his throat slit. If Donald Trump wins, how are we going to have a peaceful transition? The left is saying Trump's a dictator who's going to turn the military on them. They're just going to hand him the keys to the White House and pretend like he's Mitt Romney. They're not just smearing Trump. They're saying half the country's Hitler. Listen.
It doesn't so much matter that Donald Trump is selling fascism. What really matters is that roughly half of Americans, including a clear majority of American men, are buying it. The average American man is saying yes to fascism right now. Why?
In the last week, they've said American men are sexist fascists, whose only chance of getting lucky in bed is if they vote for Kamala. They're admitting they have Trump derangement syndrome.
I'm an optimistic person. I'm not hysterical. I laugh when people say, oh, you've got Trump derangement syndrome. I think if you're a reasonable person, you should have Trump derangement syndrome.
Rules for men, Jimmy, listen closely. Men should never let another person make them irrationally emotional. You don't give someone else power over you. Deep breath, Jimmy. Stoicism. I'll send you a book.
And welcome to Hannity. And tonight, Kamala Harris is calling for amnesty, straight up telling Telemundo that the millions of unvetted Harris-Biden illegal immigrants, the ones she allowed into the country, should have a pathway to citizenship. Let's take a look.
Right now, we're talking about border security, and there's nobody, no Democrat, talking about pathway to citizenship, and immigration relief, and the benefits that migrants bring to this country.
Oh, but there's no question that migrants bring. America is a country that was built in part by immigrants.
Forget about respecting laws, border sovereignty. And I'm sure that if Democrats offer people something of such incredible great value, I'm sure that they're hoping that the recipients of such generosity will be forever grateful. And those that give something so amazing. Anyway, we're going to play more of her disastrous Telemundo interview. That's straight ahead tonight. And later, we're going to bring you new details from Missouri, where a Democratic Senate candidate accidentally, wounded a local journalist with shrapnel during a reckless photo op at a makeshift shooting range. The Missouri Democrat called it, quote, a great day at the range with my friend Adam Kinzinger. But first, early voting is now underway in almost every state. You could say every day for the next 13 days, if there's voting going on, it is Election Day. So get to the polls. Take nothing for granted. The margins, they are razor thin. The red wave never materialized in 2022. There is not one person, let me be very clear about this, in this country today with any degree of certainty that can tell you who is going to win this election. And if you care about your country and the future direction of this country, my humble advice, especially if you live in Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, is to assume that your vote will determine the outcome of this election. I hope everybody will look at it as that important. Now, for the second straight day, no rallies for Kamala Harris. Instead, she was in the Washington swamp using her vice presidential podium, shocking, to smear Donald Trump. And now Kamala's once self-proclaimed joyful campaign, they have now reverted back to the same tired old tactics that we always see from Democrats in election years, and it's almost like a permanent cycle, and that is smear, slander, besmirchment, lying, and have supporters comparing Donald Trump to Hitler and to Stalin and to Mussolini. And, of course, he's racist. Today, Harris herself used a years-old, corroborated, bogus accusation from a former disgruntled chief of staff to compare Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler. Take a look.
It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is.
In May of 2018, that same person was praising Donald Trump on NPR. Unfortunately, Kamala gets 0 points for creativity. Take a look at your screen. Let's have a little history lesson, a Hannity history lesson. In 2008, Democrats, they compared John McCain to Hitler. 4 years later, Democratic strategist David Axelrod, he works at Fake News CNN, he compared Mitt Romney to Hitler. Nikki Haley was compared to Hitler's girlfriend, Eva Braun, and we could go on and on and on. It's a time-honored tradition of Democrats. Comparing Republicans to Nazis is a tradition in the Democratic Party. When you have nothing else to run on, this is what you are left with. In fact, just last week, The Atlantic actually compared Trump to Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini, the unholy trinity of evil dictators, right? But remember, Donald Trump was president for 4 years. He started no new wars. He signed a historic peace deal in the Middle East. He lowered your taxes. He cut regulation. He signed criminal justice reform. He secured our border. Not exactly the record of an evil, warmongering lover of Adolf Hitler and a madman. And needless to say, the melodramatic comparisons to Hitler, they are falling flat, and they're all predictable. And it's not going to stop there. So buckle up. It'll be an emotional roller coaster ride. The Democrats, their allies in the state-run media mob, they will be trying every day the tactic of slander, smear. We just found out after 10 years Donald Trump did this and that, and just buckle up, because you know it's coming. Kamala Harris cannot run on her terrible record or her far-left radical and extreme beliefs. So, smearing Donald Trump and calling him names, and frankly, those that support him, calling them names, is pretty much the only tool left in their political toolbox. But per usual, Barack Obama is so perplexed, he's bewildered about how American politics have become so bitter. You know, he did once talk about bitter people that cling to their God, guns, Bibles, and religion, too. Take a look.
As frustrating as politics can be sometimes, and I know it can be frustrating. Look, I do not watch cable news. I really don't. There are times where I don't understand how we got so toxic and just so divided and so bitter. And I get why sometimes people just don't want to pay attention to it.
Really, Barack? Let's do ourselves a favor. Let's take a little walk down memory lane. Maybe we can refresh your memory. Maybe somebody will show this to you, considering you don't watch cable news, although you mentioned me about 10 or 15 times when you were running for president. Take a look.
I'll put Mr. Burgess up against Sean Hannity. He'll tear him up.
If you accept the support of Klan sympathizers before you are president, you will accept their support after you're president.
You got their plan, which is let's have dirtier air, dirtier water, less people with health insurance. I don't want to quell anger. I think people are right to be angry. I'm angry. I need you to go out and talk to your friends and talk to your neighbors. I want you to talk to them whether they're independent or whether they are Republican. I want you to argue with them and get in their face.
Argue with them, get in their face. I have no idea how politics has gotten this way. Every 4 years, the same playbook from the Democrats. Well, now the smears are worse than ever. They're in a panic. At this point, they just hate Donald Trump, hate his supporters so much, it seems there is nothing that they won't do or they won't say. So buckle up. It's only going to get worse. Most Americans, they simply want the price of every item they buy in every store they go to come down. They want to pay less for a gallon of gasoline. They would like a secure border so people from 180 countries and countries with terror ties and known terrorists and murderers and rapists and violent criminals and gangs and cartels don't come into our country. They want less crime. They want a world of peace. But the best the Democratic Party, the best Kamala Harris can do is offer up more anti-Trump hysteria. That is their favorite go-to. That includes former comedian turned emotional Democratic sycophant Jimmy Kimmel. Take a look.
I'm an optimistic person. I'm not hysterical. I laugh when people say, oh, you've got Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
I think if you're a reasonable person, you should have Trump derangement syndrome. Right. And by the way, I think he has derangement syndrome about us, too. The fact of the matter is, this is a dangerous person.
No wonder nobody watches this show, and Greg Gutfeld keeps kicking his ass. Anyway, speaking of Trump derangement syndrome, poor Democratic strategist, our friend James Carville, he's getting more and more unglued every day. Now he's comparing this election to slitting throats in World War II. And I'm not making that up. Take a look.
I'm really not interested in being very fair about the whole thing. Okay, I really don't think we should have fought fair against the Germans and the Japanese. I think we should have snuck around them, and I think we should have, gone behind them in the lines and cut their throats, because That was what it was at stake. I think we're literally approaching the same place right now. And I'm not talking about, everybody stop, don't faint. I'm not talking about actually slitting a political opponent's throats.
Don't fight fair, slit their throats, but I don't mean actually. James, you may need to check with your doctor. You may need to increase your daily dose of those gummies that you were talking about. Now, think about this. Democrats, the Biden administration, they have tried to put Trump in jail. They have tried to remove him from the ballot in multiple states. They have pressured big tech companies to censor conservatives online. They held a bogus primary that Biden won by millions of votes before the party elites decided to remove him from the top of the ticket and simply installed Kamala Harris in a last-minute political coup. Kamala herself has frequently called for the Senate filibuster to be eliminated so she can ram through her radical agenda like the radical Green New Deal with ease. Kamala is also apparently open to packing the U.S. Supreme Court, which would all but eliminate a co-equal branch of our government and corrupt our system of checks and balances. Both Kamala Harris and Tim Walz routinely attack the First Amendment, and they want to unilaterally destroy the Second Amendment. Maybe somebody could teach Tim how to load his own shotgun. Anyway, Democrats want Americans, they want you to believe that Trump is a threat to democracy. Buckle up. The next 13 days, the smear, the slander, the lying, the besmirchment, the attacks will get worse hour after hour after hour. Here's only one question that really matters. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? That very question is a big problem for Kamala Harris. And today, our very own Sarah Carter caught up with several Harris supporters in Philadelphia who are now worried that Kamala might not have what it takes to win this election. Take a look.
To Vice President Kamala Harris is going to be here tonight.
I know.
So you're probably going to be watching, right?
Yeah.
What do you want to hear from her? Is there something that you haven't heard yet that you'd like to hear? Do you want more details?
I know what her position is on the border, and I know what her position is on inflation, but I also think that sometimes she tends not to get to the point. So I would really like her to explain it more pointedly.
How are you feeling about the election today? I mean,
very worried.
Very worried.
Very worried.
What has you worried?
Who's going to win?
Yeah, very, very worried. They call it too very close, and I can't understand how it could be close.
Mind if I ask you who you voted for?
I voted for Kamala.
Do you feel the eyes on you?
Oh, yeah, it's very tense, very tense, especially as a walking tour guide talking about history. So.
Well, yeah, this is it. I mean, this is Independence Hall. This is our Constitution, our Founding Fathers.
Yeah.
How important is this election to you as a young voter?
I think it's pivotal.
How important is this election to you in modern political history right now?
Yeah, I guess it is pretty important. It does affect all of our lives, obviously, and we do need to make a good decision regarding who we choose.
Oh, that works. Better use that later tonight. Happy Wednesday, everyone. So to encourage couples to have more children, South Korea is offering a program that will provide nannies for only $7 an hour. In a related story, guess who's moving to South Korea? Yeah, you can clap. At a campaign event in Detroit, Eminem introduced Barack Obama, which makes sense. They both made a career out of pretending to be black. What'd he say? All right.
If he wouldn't have said that 2 weeks ago, I'd have been mad.
Yeah. Self-proclaimed witches have been trying to cast curses on Donald Trump. Sadly for them, though, they were beaten to the punch. A new poll shows Trump with a slim lead over Harris with Arab Americans. Harris would attempt to speak directly to those voters, but she hasn't yet nailed the accent. A Missouri TV reporter was hurt by a bullet fragment at a Democrat Senate candidate's gun demonstration, nearly shooting a reporter. He must be trying to appeal to Republicans. But But as one Democrat noted, hey, these things happen. A drunk driver in Milwaukee nearly crashed into Kamala's motorcade. No one was injured, and the boozed-up driver claimed he was heading to Iraq. Passengers on a Spirit Airlines flight from Dallas to LA freaked out when they saw a rat roaming around the plane. How embarrassing for the rat. The NFL Players Association claims that having reporters in the locker rooms is an invasion of privacy, especially if it's a late-night talk show host pretending to be a reporter. All right. And finally, the insane clown posse has endorsed Kamala Harris for president. Here they are without their makeup. Monologue time. So back in 2007, in written testimony to Congress, DA Kamala Harris showed herself capable of some truly inspired argumentation. There was only one problem. That inspiring language wasn't hers. See, when she wasn't just lifting a wine glass, she was lifting all those sentences. According to the Washington Free Beacon, Kamala's statement in support of a loan repayment plan for local prosecutors was taken almost verbatim from an Illinois DA's opinion on the same subject that was given to the Senate months prior. Roughly 80% of her testimony was copied word for word from that old guy over there, Paul Logley of Winnebago County, Illinois, who, by the way, is a Republican. Holy That's like me stealing jokes from Jimmy Kimmel. I'd never do that, not because he's my competition, but because he has cancer of the funny bone. But that's not the only time she committed stolen verbiage. While she was California AG, she published a report on sex trafficking in her state. In that, she copied a fictional example of the type of call received by the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which told the story of how a woman in D.C. was saved from forced prostitution. But in her report, Harris never said the story was fake. Instead, she changed the location to San Fran to get credit for a rescue that never actually happened.
Dirty.
There are other examples, but this is at least the second time Harris has been caught in a blatant act of plagiarism. She's the literary version of a smash and grabber. Remember, Kamala, anything under 900 words and you won't get charged. The language is exactly the same, line after line. Harris even kept the typos and grammar errors. She didn't even try to make her theft look like her own. I mean, maybe it's because she loves rap and she considers it more like sampling. But it's weird, you know, that none of this is surprising. Perhaps because her only concrete policy proposal, no taxes on tips, she stole from another Republican, her opponent. So in light of the fact that nothing Kamala says gives you any idea of what she believes, is it any surprise that less than 2 weeks out from Election Day, even Rachel Levine is asking, who the hell is this woman? Now, all this comes on the heels of a report that Kamala lifted entire sections of her policy book, Smart on Crime. Who knew she was actually talking about herself stealing? Even the New York Times, which initially rushed to defend her, finally had to admit her thievery. But the real point isn't Kamala's serial plagiarism. It's how in the past this would end a campaign. It would lead every newscast. This would be the October surprise. I mean, this is way worse than what sunk Joe Biden in '87 when he was caught stealing speeches from a British leader. And worse, it was this guy he stole it from.
That's pretty damn good.
But also, Harris has no core principles, or any non-core principles. Her head is as empty as her husband's balls after nanny season. There is a nanny season.
There's a nanny season?
Yes. She grew up in a middle-class family that was pretty well off. She's an American that spent her formative years in Canada, and she's going to save democracy after she plotted a coup against her boss. I don't even know what Doug sees in her since she won't put him down for a nap. In fact, she might be the least honest politician ever. Listen to her on the Biden decline cover-up.
Can you say that you were honest with the American people about what you saw in those moments with President Biden as you were with him again and again, repeatedly in that time?
Of course. Joe Biden is an extremely accomplished, experienced, and capable.
You never saw anything
Absolutely.
like what happened at the debate night behind closed doors with him?
It was a bad debate.
Can the American people trust you in these moments, even when it's maybe uncomfortable for Americans to level with Americans in that way?
I speak with not only sincerity, but with a real firsthand account of watching him do this work. I have no reluctance in saying that.
Apologies, that should have come with bongos.
Joe Biden is an extremely accomplished, experienced, and capable in every way. I speak with not only sincerity, but with a real firsthand account of watching him do this work.
It always makes more sense. Incredible. But like the conveyor belt at the manure factory, the load of crap keeps coming. Listen to her on transgender laws.
Do you believe that transgender Americans should have access to gender-affirming care in this country?
I believe we should follow the law. I mean, I think you're probably pointing to the fact that Donald Trump's campaign has spent tens of millions of dollars.
They're trying to define you on this.
Yes,
I'm asking you to define yourself, though. Just broadly speaking, what is your value? Do you believe they should have that access?
I believe that people, as the law states, even on this issue about federal law.
What horse? The reporter even set up the question as a pro-trans layup, and she still threw a brick, as if she actually has no impact on the law. And remember, there are other laws she doesn't follow, like the 25th Amendment. You know, you thought Biden was an empty vessel? He's got nothing on this broad. Fact is, we really don't know what this woman stands for. Maybe that's the point.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.